Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Reviews video. Welcome back to the EQS SUV. Today we actually get to drive the thing. Now, a little while ago, I'll leave the link in the description, I made a full tour video of this, front to back, experiencing basically the whole design, the feel of the car, because I couldn't quite yet tell you how it drives. Except now that sort of limitation has lifted and I can tell you everything about the driving dynamics of the EQS SUV. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to drive it for the first time together. I'm going to be driving actually two different versions of the SUV in this video. And so I'm going to first take you on a tour of it. I'm then going to drive it for the first time. You'll literally be with me for the first inches in the car. And then we're going to go back out again in this particular car later on in the video and do sort of the real driving evaluation now that I've spent some time with it. So if you're into driving dynamics, how things sound, feel, and go down the road, this is the video for you. If you want to know all about the technology, the design, the space in the third row, that's already been posted, and I'll leave a link to that one previously. Let's start with sort of the layout of the car, and we're coming into this with some previous knowledge. I've made plenty of videos with the EQS sedan, and specifically the 450 Plus, the rear-wheel drive version. We had that one for a couple weeks on loan and did a whole bunch of driving stuff, and I'll leave some links below for you to reference those. And the thing with the EQS sedan is I've always said it's just a crazy comfortable car, right? You go down the road, it's so well built, it's so solid, and the suspension is so soft, but almost too soft. Like, in my opinion, that 450 Plus had very little sporting credential, because when I go into a corner and I hit a bump, I'm sort of maxing out the suspension and I'm running into the bump stops. So as a performance sedan, it wasn't. As a luxury sedan, it was. And I think we can all agree that the EQS sedan isn't the most beautiful shape on the planet. It also doesn't have the most amount of rear seat headroom. And hopefully you saw in the previous video with this vehicle that it has a lot more space on the inside, even though it has the identical wheelbase to the EQS sedan. It's basically the same chassis underneath. So what I'm going to be looking forward to today is how adapted is this to handle some of those bigger suspension undulations. We're actually even going to take it off-roading because the EQS SUV has some off-road cred, and we'll talk about that when we get into the drivetrain logic. But I'm really curious, like, is it going to be as comfortable as the sedan and then also not max out the suspension and have some sporting cred? This is what Mercedes promises me, so we'll experience all of this together. Let's talk about how this is laid out. You have a 4-link suspension up front. It uses an air spring with an adaptive damper, compression and rebound controlled through software. So you have a few different drive modes: comfort, sport, eco, and off-road. There's also an individual drive mode where you can basically pick how you want your steering to be, how you want your throttle to be, how you want your ESP calibrated, all around. One thing that's interesting is you can't put ESP in sport mode with comfort suspension, and my guess is because this can be so soft and so comfortable, they actually really want to control some of the body movements if you're on the edge. Now, before I go any farther, it's important to mention most people will not be approaching this from a performance standpoint. This is going to be an everyday urban family transporter, perhaps a luxury executive SUV for someone sitting in the back seat, even, especially in this spec with the rear screens. But it's not really a performance vehicle. However, as a German luxury vehicle, it needs to do some things that are just, without question. It needs to be able to corner quite well. It needs to be able to sit at high speed quite smoothly and comfortably and stably. Stability is the most important thing here. And so we're going to, yes, drive it hard so you don't really have to, just to get an idea of where the limits are and how it performs. Okay, so we have the same wheelbase, quite long wheelbase, as the EQS sedan. I want to say a huge thank you to Sparrow World for sponsoring today's video. Hey, these guys are doing something pretty incredible. They are supporting our forgotten Afghan allies through this wonderful charity, which you can find on freedomraffle.org. All you have to do is purchase a $150 ticket, and you're immediately entered to win a Tesla Model S Plaid. Guess what? Sparrow World already has the Plaid, so as soon as you win the raffle, it shouldn't take long for you to get the car. On top of that, you have the best chances ever that I've seen of winning one of these cars in the raffles that we've done here. And that's because Sparrow World has only sold about 20% of their tickets coming up to their deadline. So all you have to do is head to freedomraffle.org to support our forgotten Afghan allies by purchasing some tickets. And of course, you're entered to win that awesome Model S Plaid. Best of luck, and thank you to Sparrow Worldwide for sponsoring today's video. Suspension is, I can tell you immediately, going to be tuned very soft. There is a sport mode. Will you ever use it if you own one? I'm not sure, but we have to try it out because they put one in there. Interestingly, 10 degrees of rear steering, even on the SUV like the sedan. So when you turn the wheel all the way, which I actually should be able to demonstrate to you, even dry steering, at least on dirt. Let me try this really quick. Let's put the car on. There we go, into drive. So I feel bad for doing that to the rear axle, dry steering it, but there you go. You can see well, now that I put it in park, it closed itself, but rear steering happens. The rear steering is actuated by an electric motor and a drive belt, and again, 10 degrees of fluctuation. In EQS as well, it's 10 degrees unless you get the AMG variant, which we're not even discussing today because there's no AMG variant of the EQS, at least yet, SUV. And that gets 9 degrees of rear steering. Okay, just because it has a bit of a wider tire on it. But the rear steering is quite magical in the sedan. I expect it to be the same here in the SUV. Overall, you know, the seating position and everything I discussed in the previous video, that all feels the same. You sit nice and low in this car. You have a big high dash. The one thing that does make a big difference just sitting inside though, I just want to tell you really quick before you'll see me experience all this for the first time, is look here on the hood. These arches, these domes, it means you can actually see down the front of the car. The EQS sedan, the whole hood just flows away from you, and it's hard to sort of position the car in a tight parking space. Having these domes really helps see out the front. All right, so battery pack, 107.8 kilowatt hour usable. Okay, that's pretty sizable, no question. But then again, it's only a 400 volt system, and it's a low 400 volt system. So it's like 380, 390 nominal, something like this. Charges with 500 amps means it maxes out at about 200 kilowatts. We've seen it just a bit over with the EQS sedan. This should be the same battery pack. And I'll get out of the way. I really want to commend Mercedes for this. One of the best route planners in the business. It gets you to the chargers nice and low. You can even set your individual, how comfortable do you feel letting the battery go down when you arrive at a charging station. So it'll go down to about 5% state of charge on arrival. It does have plug-in charge, and it has battery preconditioning. So it's got all the things you need for a long-distance EV. I think they did an amazing job on the software for the EV stuff, controlling the hardware that they have. So let's talk variants and specs. The first EQS SUV that we're going to take out, my first drive, I wanted to drive the base one, which is a rear-wheel drive. Why would they offer their SUV in rear-wheel drive? I don't know, but there's plenty of markets, I think, where it actually works, specifically in the southern states, but I'm not convinced they should have offered rear-wheel drive in the EQS SUV. I don't know. Let me give you some of the specs on this one though, and I have to pull it up. Starting price on the rear-wheel drive for the US market is $104,400. I'm not sure if that includes destination or not. My guess is yes. 265 kilowatt rear motor as standard. This is in the EQS 450 Plus. That doesn't sound like much, and we'll try the acceleration. And on paper, it doesn't look like much either, to be honest. It is 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds, 355 horsepower, 419 pound-feet of torque. Yeah, that doesn't seem so luxurious. But again, if you're just using this as a shuttle vehicle, which a lot of them will be used for, if you live in Texas, if you live in Florida, do you really need the all-wheel drive or more performance? I don't think so. Interestingly, you can then upgrade to a variant that's not coming out at launch. It'll come a few months after launch, is my understanding, and that is called the EQS 450 4MATIC. So that is the same level, 450, but then adds the additional front motor on here, and I'll talk about the motor layout in a second and how they're controlled and everything. And this is the same 265 kilowatt peak output, but the 0 to 60 time drops from 6.5 to 5.8 seconds. So almost, nears makes no difference, a second off the 0 to 60, but with no extra power. How's that possible? And a little bit extra weight. And this is what's really important. You can't just look at the power number. You need to, just like charging, look at the power curve. My guess is the rear wheel drive is going to not launch that hard, and it's going to give us full power as we gain some speed. The 450 4MATIC should give us everything from zero. That's what I'm hoping that'll give, and I think that's going to be probably the most popular variant of the EQS, will be the EQS 450 4MATIC. Just a guess, no one's told me that, but that's my guess. And then you can step up to this thing, which is full beans, $125,950 starting for the EQS 580 4MATIC. This thing, 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds, 130 mile an hour top speed. They actually all do 130. And let's see, 536 horsepower, 636 pound-feet. Forgive me for looking at my notes there. So big numbers. Do you need big numbers in a luxury SUV? Well, some people would say yes. They just want to have the best one, and yeah, go for it. That's this. I have not actually, that's not true. I have sampled the 450 4MATIC, the one that I think is going to be most popular. It won't be in this video. I think it's totally fine, by the way. So that's my recommendation right off the bat. If you don't want to watch the whole thing, I think you go 450 4MATIC. You get all-wheel drive, plenty of performance. Crazy. This thing scoots. We'll talk about how it drives when we get into it, of course. Okay, motor layout and design. This is where it gets pretty fascinating. 2 permanent magnet motors on this car. Typically, I like to see a rear permanent magnet motor and a front induction motor in this type of setup. The reason is permanent magnet motors can't ever totally be shut off. There's always losses when it comes to range. Now, the bigger battery pack you have, the heavier the car is, the less these things become important. But I know of rumors, at least, that maybe not for EQS, but for future variants, I've heard Mercedes might be working on a front axle disconnect. So we'll see if that actually makes its way to market in future variants built on this EVA 2 platform. So the rear motor, permanent magnet, 6-phase, 2 individual inverters, and basically 2 separate 3-phase windings. This is good for sustained performance, a little bit for efficiency, not great for cost or complication, but it's a Mercedes, it's quite an expensive product. You can do these kind of cool things. So I think they did an amazing job on the rear motor, and it's the same motor that's out of the EQS sedan, and it is one of the quietest, nicest electric motors. A lot of people will say all electric motors feel the same, drive the same. Couldn't be more wrong. There's motor cogging, there's harmonics, there's inverter winds, there's things that the user can pick up on, and this is a very well-tuned unit. It also has a lot of thermal longevity. They have direct cooling right to the rotor inside of the motor itself. They also do some cool things for efficiency where they take the waste heat from the motor and actually share that heat with the transmission. Of course, it's a single gear, but in the winter time, this really warms up the transmission quickly, and that helps reduce frictional losses to get you more range in cold weather. I mean, some pretty cool tech is going on. The front motor is definitely not as advanced as the rear motor. This is a 3-phase motor up front, permanent magnet system, a very standard type motor. One thing I am curious about, though, is in the EQS sedan, I actually prefer the rear-wheel drive, the 450 Plus. First of all, big range, rear-wheel drive, all that stuff. We don't know exact EPA figures for this car, but for the SUV, I'm expecting about 300 miles for the rear-wheel drive version, maybe high 200s for the all-wheel drives. My guess is, I don't know for sure, but my guess is the all-wheel drives use the same powertrain. The 450 Plus is just software detuned. I don't know that to be true, but that would make the most sense to me. Doesn't really matter either way, but my guess is those will be rated around the same range, the all-wheel drives versus the rear-wheel drives. And maybe by the time this video comes out, all that info would be available. The EQS sedan, the point I was going to make was the rear-wheel drive is so quiet. You hear nothing because all that electronics, the high-frequency stuff, the harmonics are all in the rear axle. When you add the front motor in the EQS sedan, it actually doesn't ride as nice. The suspension kinematics change a little bit, and you really hear that front motor working quite often. And not sure I like that so much. We'll see how it is in the SUV. The seating position's different, the cabin layout's different. Maybe some of these noises don't transfer on the inside. So we'll play around with it. Is there anything else I should tell you about this? 200 kilowatt max charging, I told you. Most of the other stuff's in the previous video, but just to save you some time so you don't have to watch it. It's a 7-seat version. This is maxed out, has every option. We're gonna drive this later on in the video, but what we're gonna do now is jump into the EQS 450 Plus, the rear wheel drive, and just cruise around Denver in it, just get a sense of it. I took it over to my friend Drew to show him the car, and just to get a feeling of it. Then After that drive, we're gonna jump into this one here now. We're actually about to go shoot this, and I'm gonna do the full driving review after I've spent some time with this vehicle. And right off the bat, this thing is uber comfortable, uber luxurious, as you would expect from an S-Class level variant, and very similar driving to an EQS sedan, just on stilts. Enjoy my first impressions of the car. Come join me for a drive, and then we'll hop in this one and go send it on some mountain roads, but also most importantly, cruise on the highway, because that's where I think you're gonna spend most of the time in one of these. And welcome to the inside of the EQS SUV. Let's adjust that. Wow. Okay, if you thought EQS sedan was big, this thing's pretty hefty. Love the huge steering wheel. I have not moved an inch in this yet, but I wanted to share my very first impressions with you. Just a quick drive across town. I'm actually going to pick up Drew, our friend at Martian Wheels, because the EQS SUV launch is at home. We're in Denver. And so I was like, oh, I'll go pick Drew up and we'll go around. Also, I kind of wanted to get a photo of Eva, his new baby daughter, in the EQS SUV, because this is built on the EVA 2 platform. So I thought we should get Eva in an Eva. I don't know, nerd joke, no one will get it, but I thought that'd be kind of fun. So yeah, basically I haven't set anything up. I'm just going over there, and then later on in the video we'll get more into the nerd level driving things. But I thought let's at least go for our first quick drive in the EQS SUV. Already noticing an insane amount of rear steering, just incredible. And huge thanks to Mercedes for inviting us out to drive these things and explore them. I actually get to spend 2 days with EQS SUV. I'm first, to lay it all out, spending today just cruising around the city a little bit, just getting to know the car. Then, well, let's turn the volume off. Then going off-roading in 1 hour's time. We're gonna go up towards Idaho Springs and take this thing out in an off-road park, which is like, okay, is anyone gonna do that in an EQS SUV? I don't know, but I want to. I think that'd be pretty cool. And if it has some off-road cred, we should do it. If you guys remember, I had a chance to ride in the EQS SUV. This is my first time driving it. And in that video, we did some off-roading in the woods and stuff, which was pretty cool. So, first of all, presence on the road. Big, very wide. We own an Audi e-tron. I recently just did a 3,000 miles in the BMW iX. This is bigger. Finally, we've needed some big electric SUVs with 7 seats.
In a quarter of a mile,
Please stop
right.
talking. And you know, we've really needed this big car, very GLS size car. It's not quite as big as a GLS, but this is what people drive. They got kids, they got to put stuff around, and so now we're getting into some sizable electric cars. And I kind of like it. Very similar to the sedan, you have a very high dash, instantly noticing this, but I can actually see the hood if I look up a little bit. Now, I like to sit nice and low in cars, but a lot of people, I'm thinking of my mother especially, she likes to sit quite high to see the hood. Unlike the EQS sedan, a lot of people had an issue because you couldn't see the front of the car. Here, I can actually see the bulges on the hood, and I know where the front end is, which is really quite nice. I'm driving the EQS 450 Plus right now, SUV, and you know, this is sort of the entry-level model at the moment, and it feels so smooth and so comfortable, as you would expect. So let's run on over and let's see, no turn on red from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and the car says we have to turn right. Of course, I'm not in a turning lane. I am a fan of the standard screen instead of the hyper screen, but and then you can actually select the standard screen here in EQS SUV, which I think might be the move to go for. But if you want to get the 580 and go for the big boy stuff, we don't know the exact specs for each market. I imagine similar to sedan, we'll have the hyper screen as standard, and it's not a bad screen. It's a wonderful UI. I've actually gone through, and I'll link into the description, in every menu possible on this screen. I've shown every nook and cranny of it in a video, and that is all live already on this channel. I did that with EQS sedan. It's pretty much the same here. So really wonderful UI, route planning, navigation, preconditioning for the battery pack, and plug-in charge, all capable here. Wow, this thing driving around feels like an EQS sedan on stilts, which is a good thing because EQS sedan is so much fun to drive, especially when you can do these little things with the rear steering and just kind of whoop, whoop, whoop your way around the city. The wheel is wonderful, really nice wheel, great steering. The brake pedal, just like EQS sedan is the same. So when you have it in maximum recuperation, D-, or they say strong recuperation, when you lift off, it does sort of a one pedal driving effect, and it will do full one pedal. But as it blends friction brakes, just like the sedan, the pedal moves away from you. And I really think it's the hardest part of the car to get used to for an EV driver who's used to driving Tesla or other things. So my impression, and of course we're in Denver, so no one's moving over for us, we'll give it the beans. Okay, you can scoot this thing around if you want to, that's pretty good. My impression of the brake pedal is livable, but I don't use the strong recuperation setting. I actually use normal recuperation, and then the brake pedal doesn't really pull away from you at all. So it's always in the same place, and it's a pretty consistent feel as long as you don't put it in max regen. And then it's totally fine, drives just like a normal car, as you would expect and hope for. So that is livable and get used to. It doesn't work in a performance setting, but this is not meant to be a performance car. This is meant to be the everyday cruiser, the 450 plus EQS SUV. I don't believe there will be an AMG version of this, but there should be a Maybach version coming, and that's going to be like the most luxurious thing on the planet. That's going to be the car if you want smooth motoring. Wow, I'm just so impressed with the noise insulation. Take a listen. You hear nothing. We're hitting some gnarly bumps. You feel nothing, you hear nothing. It's like we're suspended in a cloud of air. What a wonderful feeling this is. Truly wonderful. And could not be any more comfortable at the moment. This is great. The seats with the pillows. I just want to sit back, relax, use the fantastic driver assistance system here. It has great lane centering, does lane changes. Look at this thing. It's driving itself for the moment. First experience in EQS SUV. I said the EQS sedan had to have been the most comfortable electric car on the market, and it's just been outdone by this, I can tell you instantly. Wow, this is nice. Capacitive steering wheel to driver monitoring. Great huge head-up display. I mean, if you just want to go ultimate luxury, there's no other option. Big range in these cars, 107 kilowatt hour usable. I think we did 340, 350 miles at 70 miles an hour in the sedan. Of course, this one is the SUV, so same battery pack, maybe a little bit less aerodynamic. Ooh, we need to check these driving dynamics. Skirt! Very soft. As I like it. Soft isn't necessarily a bad thing. And of course I went the wrong way. Look at me. Always making wrong turns. I was supposed to be over there. Even in my hometown, I can't go the right way, ever. That's just what you expected out of spec though, right? Wow, this is so nice. This is so nice. So there you have it. My first impressions are just by far the most comfortable electric vehicle on the market. I can already tell you that immediately. The build quality is amazing. No rattles, no creaks. You get a sense that you're just wrapped in something so well engineered. It's really, really cool. Strong recuperation. We should turn creep mode off, but auto hold right there to a stop. This is nice. I'm going to spend some more time with it. We're going to go off-roading next, and then we'll do some more driving tomorrow in, to really evaluate it. But just as a quick cruise in city and highway, it's as you would expect. If you watched any of our EQS sedan stuff, it's just that, but bigger, and I think looks a lot better. It's certainly not brisk in this trim. It's I would say it feels about the same as our e-tron 55 in terms of acceleration. Yeah, probably not much more than that. But that's okay. We love our e-tron for being just slow and comfortable, and this is more comfortable to drive than the e-tron, that's for sure. And I have a great seating position, nice and low. Maybe this is what we need to replace our e-tron. I gotta ask Alyssa if she wants one of these, because honestly, it's a bit more money than the full-size e-tron, but with this rear steering, with the tech, wow, rear steer, baby! That's wonderful. Yeah, this is a whole nother level above our full-size e-tron. And I don't know if I could get over the brake pedal thing, but I wouldn't be driving it every day. This is really, really nice. Wants me to go to the right here. Will do. Mercedes will do. Holy smokes. It's so silent. It's so silent. How do they do it? How do they do it? Well, we're wheeling the EQS SUV. Who would have ever thought we'd be going off-road in one of these things? But great to see you again. Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. Pleasure is mine.
How did you find this course out here?
Basically, when we picked Denver as the location, we were shopping around what's possible. The owner from ATV Tours here, I think it's our comp people that had the contacts there. So we checked it out. It fit quite well for what we wanted to do. We had to do a minor modifications, just widen it a little bit from the ATVs.
Okay, so you came through with a bulldozer, basically?
Correct, with a smaller one.
You can hear it grabbing brakes away, which is pretty cool.
Correct. And all the way on top of the hill, we put the moguls in there, which is going to be pretty nice.
Oh, nice, cool. What a neat course, and what a cool vehicle to be off-roading. And there is something really special about electric off-roading, because you have infinite throttle control and modulation. We'll let him complete the course, and then we'll go down after. And then, of course, just like no noise. You just are in nature. Exactly. The loudest thing here is my air-conditioned seat.
Yeah, true.
So let's see. It's the one thing with the EQS is it is hard to see right in front of it, which is why this view is so nice. But you let me know what we should or shouldn't do and where we should go. But for now, I'm just going to kind of walk it down.
You're all good.
Yeah, feels really great. The one cool thing is with the rear steering, being able to squeeze around all of these. Sometimes in tight areas, you don't necessarily want always rear steering, so you can turn it off. We'll go around, yep. And when you put it in snow chain mode, then it locks the rear wheels straight, right?
I don't know.
Okay.
I would have to double check.
Yeah, I think there is a way to at least reduce the amount of rear steering effort. But here we are, pretty much full lock, big undulation, just letting it crawl its way through. Just nice, gentle throttle. So no locking differentials. You simulate it all with brakes.
Correct.
And it's just awesome. Basically all-terrain tires, and this is like pretty no joke wheeling stuff here. So what is your recommendation for the line?
Father, and then now we cut hard right.
Yep.
Here once again you see your surrounding on the transparent hood. You see exactly how far you're off.
Yep.
Light to cut perfectly well between those two.
Nice. She's a big girl.
She is, and with 10 degrees rear axis steering, it's amazing what you can do.
That's right, and we just have a stump right over here, just need to be mindful of. Yep.
Here to the left.
Pretty amazing, this thing. And relatively smooth for being in high suspension. That's very impressive.
Very comfortable.
So I got to go with, is it Holger last time?
Holger Ansman?
Yeah.
Correct.
And he and I went in Tuscaloosa on your testing track. I'm sure you've done that a million times.
Pretty much,
yeah. And this was really cool, coming down these tight little trails with rear steering. What's amazing to me is because they're permanent magnet motors, but also 6-phase, at least in the rear we know for sure, there's very little motor cogging and harmonics at low speed. So we're on a pretty steep angle. In some electric cars, you'll hear and all this grinding away, and it just doesn't seem to care. And what's crazy about electric cars is at low speed, you need to dump a ton of current into the motor. So we'll see brakes are working, grabbing, creating pressure. And yeah, so you dump a ton of current into the motor, so cooling becomes a big issue for off-roading, especially of inverter and rotor and stator temps. But have you seen any thermal derating at all?
Nope.
It just takes the abuse.
Yep.
Amazing. And driving it off-road, it seems that it really appreciates just constant throttle and let the system figure out where to send the power.
We have basically torque on demand between the front and the rear motors on the axle, and then the fine adjustment per wheel we do with the ESP, then with the brakes with the calipers.
And I think what people are going to wonder watching this, including myself, is why spend so much time to make the EQS capable of this type of stuff when most people probably won't ever use it?
Well, myself personally, we have a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Oh, beautiful.
Every now and then, so when we go there, we need to climb up there. It's just beautiful. You have the zero noise on the interstate. You go very smooth, very comfortable, and then you climb up that hill, and it's no problem.
Amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of EQS SUV owners will have second homes or cabins out in the middle of nowhere, and it's just nice to know you can.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I think, especially for around here in Colorado, I expect these to be quite popular. And this is probably more hardcore than what most people would be doing, but again, not out of the realm of possibilities. This is doing trails like this. I know a lot of people that have driveways that look like this, and then we have snow and ice. And for snow driving, what is the mode you recommend putting the EQS in?
It would be here the off-road mode. If you go like on a steep hill, just to have that fine adjustment on your ESP system, all around.
And it elongates the throttle a little bit, which is nice. So more modulation room.
Correct. But other than that, it really the sensor pick up on your standard comfort mode if you go regular highways, and it really is no problem.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. It's just, it's amazing how good this actually is. Great.
And once again, here rear axle steering is doing a great job getting us around.
Yeah, holy smokes.
It actually feels fun when you speed up a little bit.
Yeah.
Climb up there, and the rear axle steering is basically pushing you around.
Right. Yeah, kind of like drifting almost.
Correct.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Really fun. Man, the drivetrain control is amazing. You just put your foot down, and it figures it out.
Yeah.
The other thing that this is doing, which a lot of electric cars actually struggle with, is the throttle is so much longer, and over these bumps, we're not getting this jerk as my foot is moving.
Exactly.
So that's really impressive, because we've off-roaded every electric thing you can off-road, and sometimes you have to like lock your foot into a place, and it's
to
really
fine dose it.
Yeah.
Correctly. This is very, very nicely done.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
Here, once again, no visibility, so the transparent hood is great help to find your track.
That's pretty nice for sure. Really quite like it. Up and over some of these humps.
Go left on that bank.
Oh, and then come down this way.
Pretty hard time.
Okay, so we'll try some of that side angle. What's the maximum roll that you can go in this?
Would have to look it up.
Yeah, probably quite a bit.
Yeah.
You think we're gonna make it this way?
Oh yeah.
Great.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. And we'll just kind of walk it down. You can hear ABS clicking in the background. We also have downhill speed regulation, but maybe a bit too fast for this type of scenario.
Correct, and not enough distance. But once we go down the long stretch, we will have it activated.
Nice.
So we go left around that tree, and there we would wait then for the other car. We can do shots.
And now we're going to demonstrate some elephant steps, some moguls. I stepped out just to see how much lift we can get out of this thing. This is the EQS 580 that we're in at the moment. And man, with the suspension up high, get an extra inch of ground clearance. I'm loving these Cooper AT tires. Let's send it through the moguls and see how this thing does. Nice. Wheel in the air. Love it. You can see the brakes grabbing as soon as they go in there. We should see this front tire start to go. There we go. You can see it stops motion, very similar to traditional ESP tuning. And then, yeah, looking really good, I have to say. That's awesome. That front tire is going to dip down in there now. This one's going to tuck. So let's see how much tuck we can get there. Looking nice. And here we go. This is the shot. The big wheel lift. Haha. This is really cool. Look at that right there. Nice. And you can see the rear motor's really protected underneath the battery pack. They obviously tuned this to fit the EQS SUV perfectly, but still pretty nice to see that much articulation, even in high suspension mode, from something that's not really built to do hardcore off-roading. It does it amazingly well. It's just very competent at this. The drivetrain control is what is most impressive to me, and they just really nailed it, I think, for the target let's get up to the cabin in the woods situation. Really freaking cool. And then of course you get that awesome rear steering happening right there. Just awesome. Hey Alyssa, welcome to the inside of the EQS.
Thank you.
Nice of you to join.
Of course.
So yesterday you didn't have a chance to go for a ride with me in the rear wheel drive.
No.
I also drove the standard all-wheel drive, the 450 4MATIC, and now we're in the maxed out 580. So let's go for a drive in this one in just regular comfort mode, because one thing I noticed, this is not an AMG variant. This is just the sort of big motor, powerful motor, still comfort level, very similar to like an E500 or E550 in today's number, or nomenclature, I should say. But one thing that is important is that they don't compromise on ride quality. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it's very, 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 very smooth, as expected, and yeah, it's like a little cloud.
Yeah, so you do think it's very smooth then?
Yes.
Nice. Yeah. And I would agree. Let's take a look. Acceleration right off the bat. This thing has got some consistent, solid, hardcore acceleration.
Yeah, it's pretty nifty. This is like the ultimate gotta get my kid to soccer practice car.
This is definitely got to get my kid to soccer practice. Absolutely. What we're going to do, because it's the 580, it's sort of the sporty one, is we're actually going to put it into sport mode. And we're going to start by going up this relatively quick and tight mountain road highway that we test a lot of cars on.
Yeah, our hogbacks.
Yep, so that's actually not too far away from here, but not the hogbacks here.
Not the exact. Okay, no.
But you're right, same area. When we do all of those, like, let's drive everything in one go with the local media organizations, this is where we drive.
Right,
Remember that?
Right. Yep.
Okay, so let's initially start by hustling this thing around a little bit. Well, power is insane. It just has such consistent and huge, big power, all the way to high speeds. A lot of vehicles will taper off. Now, we noticed yesterday, I noticed in the 450 Plus, that it had nothing off the line, and then it gave everything to you around 35 miles an hour. This just gives everything to you all the time, no matter the speed, from 0 to allegedly triple digits.
It's very heavy feeling.
Yes, so that's the next point. When we get into the handling of this thing, this is an EQS SUV. All of those big letters mean it drives like you would expect. Coming around into these corners, I mean, we're not going that fast, but you just get a sense of the weight of this thing. And the heft. And there's no, you can't really use the word lightweight or agile with an SUV like this at all. And I think it's actually okay. I think it's fair to say this is not meant to be a canyon carver.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so, but the question is, can it go up to the cabin comfortably, quickly? The answer is yes. So, just as a note, yesterday I drove the EQS 450 4MATIC, the one that I think will be the most popular. I thought that had very good, consistent power throughout the band. It was basically take this power curve and just, it felt like a 20% reduction. You don't get this hard hit, but you do get a pretty good shove. And, you know, maybe for us, yeah, it's fun to get the fast one. I don't know if it's really worth the extra money for the 580.
I don't care for fast cars, so...
Yeah, in something this comfortable, I'd save the money and not get the fast one, to be honest. Unless you just want that 580 badge on the back. But one thing I noticed was I had it on some really hardcore twisty canyon roads. And coming into corners and around, the body motions, as long as you treated the vehicle with respect, if you got into a corner gently and you leaned the weight over, it was very well balanced and very well controlled. What it didn't like was to be hustled.
Yeah.
It doesn't want to be thrown into a corner and kind of big weight transfers around. That it's not so good at. So we're about to hit a twisty road here. Actually, what I'm going to do is click the car button here, and you can switch off ESP, which is nice. And this is some testing roads that I've been on before, but let's go send it. So big power into these tight corners. You can see it's just a big thing.
A little bit of tire squeal. Sorry for all our bags in the back.
Yes, so tire squeal, it's very under-tired. It's on eco-efficient, rolling resistant, all-season tires. So first of all, there's not much grip when we get into talking about how it handles when you drive it hard. And then there's, of course, the glaring negative point to me as a driver.
What's that?
The brake pedal. Just like the EQS sedan, they use this iBooster strategy, which I don't think is working out well for them. I think they've received the feedback, they understand it, they know. I spoke with some of the engineers and they're like, yeah, we got the feedback, but the brake pedal is very odd. So what will happen is the strategy is, first of all, with your regen settings, you have no recuperation where it coasts, you have some where it blends in some regen, and then when you go to strong recuperation, Mercedes only allows 0.3 Gs of recuperation up to 290 kilowatts. That's the physical limitation of the system. So 0.3 Gs. And then if it wants to decelerate more, because no matter what in strong recuperation, it gives you the same deceleration curve. So even if you're fully charged, it slows down. It actually physically moves the brake pedal away from you to build pressure in the iBooster.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and so it's an electric booster, but the pedal moves down. So when you lift off the acceleration in strong recuperation, which is how I like to drive a car in a very one-pedal way,
right.
The pedal physically moves away and you're not even hitting it. It's like, whoa, where'd it go?
Oh.
And then when you do hit the brake pedal, it's got a very long travel. And I just think it's a very mushy, vague feeling braking system.
Well, I think that kind of fits with this car. This car is a very mushy car.
It's a very mushy car with a very mushy brake. I agree. And I've gotten used to the brake pedal the more time I've spent with it. And I know some owners of EQS sedan, it doesn't bother them. But it, I think, does bother a lot of people just getting in the car. So what I end up doing is driving the vehicle in normal recuperation, which doesn't pull the brake pedal away from you. And then, you know, now I have the full brake pedal to modulate all the way to max out regen and then blend into friction. And it's really nice because here on the gauge cluster, it shows you how much percentage of regen you're getting, and now it's maxed out, so anything more I'm doing is from friction brakes. It's a steel brake setup. It's nothing amazing. In the AMG of the EQS sedan, you can option ceramics. I probably would save the money and not do that, but okay. When you drive it hard, though, is when the brake pedal starts acting pretty weird. So it actually needs to build ABS pressure from time to time to controlling body motion and for controlling torque vectoring, because it's an open rear differential. You with me?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you go into a corner and you nail it, it's actually got to grab one of the brakes to send power to the outside rather than doing this mechanically with a diff. And then the brake pedal starts to get real stiff and real weird, and you have no idea how much brake pressure you're giving it. And so occasionally I'll come into a corner, I'm like hard on the brakes, and as soon as I lean the car into a corner, you know, it does cornering brake control, it's like freaks out, and then it's just full emergency brake. So it's just like, not a real life big deal for most owners, but I do think it's really important to mention if you are a sporting driver or someone who values inputs to the system, not so great. Okay, so that's the brake pedal conversation out of the way. Daily driving, totally fine. Performance driving, wouldn't recommend it with this brake. The accelerator pedal in traditional Mercedes fashion is quite long and quite stiff. It's a hard accelerator pedal to push, and that's very typical of Mercedes. It's also bottom hinge instead of top hinge like Tesla stuff, so you can have your foot close to the ground for big modulation on it. And I think that's kind of nice to have as well. I say we make a U-turn here because we're stuck behind all of these cars, and I kind of want to open this thing up a little bit. So rear steering, 10 degrees, pretty amazing. I mean, it's like a 33-foot turning circle. Now we have it in full sporty mode. So big power, just a little rumble strip for fun. It said 15 miles an hour for corners. That's a lot more than that. Everything's flying around the back. Brake pedal. Man, I don't want to like freak all these cars out or these people, but at the end of the day, it's not meant to be a shredder. So this is the end of the performance position. It can get down a road. You just have to treat the car with respect. You have to set it in a corner and hold your set. It doesn't like big adjustments. It doesn't like to be thrown around. It has ample power for acceleration. And overall, if you have a mountain house, this is going to be a pleasure to get up there, but it's not a GT3 RS.
Right, no, and it's not meant to be.
It's not meant to be, but it is important to at least classify where it's at. I think it's also important to, maybe we should just touch on, compared to Audi e-tron, compared to Tesla Model X, compared to iX, all of these have different driving dynamics. Right. We're going to do a whole comparison, including of the Rivian R1S and maybe the Lucid Gravity if it's out at the time, of this electric SUV thing. This by far is the most comfortable.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's the quietest. I think it's quieter than iX, which is amazing, and it's the most comfortable. It's definitely not the most sporting, the BMW, even though it's not hardcore, but the M60 can shred down a back road.
Right, yeah. 100%.
Yeah, this is not that.
No.
Okay, so there we go. Let's jump back on the highway, throw it back in comfort mode, and not shred it any further, because that's not the point. And talk about this rear wheel steering. Right now I can feel the rear steering happening just like the sedan. Below 35 miles an hour, it works opposite of the front wheels. 35 and above, it works in conjunction. So it essentially elongates the wheelbase at high speed and shortens the wheelbase at low speed. This really helps the car feel a lot more agile in the city and way easier to maneuver. The one downside with big rear wheel steering like this is parallel parking.
Oh.
Because if you're right on a curb and turn hard, that rear wheel is going to get just jammed with tail swing into the curb. So there's a snow chains mode in here where you can lock the rear wheel straight.
Okay.
Turns off rear steer.
Huh.
And I would recommend doing that if you're parallel parking.
Yes, parallel parking is difficult.
I do wish they had like a quick access rear wheel steer off.
Do any cars have that?
Yes, our Suburban with quadra-steer has that.
Oh.
I mean, it's off all the time because the quadra-steer doesn't work anymore.
Right.
But yes, it has the selectable, rear wheels on or off of working in the opposite direction, which is a nice feature. What else should we talk about in terms of driving dynamics on the way to the highway? You know, I briefly sampled that 450 Plus in the city and was just blown away by the comfort and quietness. I still think this has to be one of the most serene vehicles to ever be in. Denver this way, let's do it. Yeah, what's your impression?
Of the drivetrain?
Well, you own an Audi e-tron, which is this
Right.
car's competition.
Mm-hmm.
And from the passenger seat, what are you feeling as a normal driver, you know, and passenger in both vehicles? Do they feel similar to you, or size-wise and driving dynamics, whatever you feel?
This one definitely has a lot more space, it feels like.
It's a much bigger.
And, but the e-tron, you could just tell there's a lot more driving dynamics that I prefer.
Mm-hmm. E-tron's sportier. No one ever thought anyone would say the e-tron's sporty.
Yeah. But in the terms of like handling and stuff, I would definitely still go for my e-tron. I think all of this is just a little bit too much for me.
What do you mean by that?
The infotainment, it's just a little boisterous for my liking.
Hyper screen, you mean?
Yeah, I never could feel like I could throw 3 dogs in here and not be very cautious to the interior getting ruined. So that's kind of my input of the car. But it is super nice.
I mean, yeah, so it's soft.
Car.
We're into a corner and we have the leaning tower of EQS coming through here. And it's soft, but the thing is, soft doesn't necessarily mean bad. It's well composed.
Yeah.
And the e-tron, definitely, I would say, understeers a bit more than this.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, it's a bit more hardcore when you dial it into dynamic mode. But look at this thing shredding through at pretty high speeds, hard throttle. It's just that front tire screaming for life. And then, yeah, so it just doesn't love that. It's not built for this.
No.
Back to cruising. So I agree, Alyssa, that the e-tron is a bit smaller, a bit more nimble on a back road. I think in town, though, this might even feel smaller than the e-tron with rear-wheel steering. Being able to position the car around places, I think that really helps with a tight urban environment.
Yeah.
And then if we compare this to iX, which I would say is a closer competitor, first of all, 3 rows in this.
Right.
And no weird steering wheel. So I much prefer driving this to the iX. I like the seats better. I like the seating position. Everything I didn't like about the iX is sort of fixed here with the EQS. The one thing about the iX that I did like was the way that it drove in a sporting way. This doesn't really have any of that character.
Well, that's Mercedes versus BMW.
Yeah,
so.
a little bit of that Mercedes versus BMW. Also, yeah, I mean, I spent time in the iX M60 most recently, which is the sportier version, which this doesn't have an equivalent per se. And compared to a Tesla Model X, I think we need to really, bring this car up as well. This is 100 times quieter, 100 times smoother, 100 times more comfortable.
And 100 times more manufactured well.
Yeah, 100 times built better than a Model X. However, you still might have to buy a Model X because of the charging network.
Right.
If you do long distance trips and you tow with it or you do stuff, that's the way to go. If you don't want a little bit of sense of adventure. Although I will say, by the end of this year, maybe into early next year, a lot of the existing charging stations that this car relies on, the DC power, are getting ripped out of the ground, replaced with new units, and it comes with 3 years of 30-minute DC fast charging for free.
Yeah, I mean, you've been griping on the whole charging network side of things, and as soon as that fixes itself, then there really is no real comparison. Obviously, Tesla is still leaps and bounds ahead of any CCS charging, but that could be easily changed very soon if they do open up their network. And so if they do that, then the
Look at
world's
this.
your oyster.
Auto lane change.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of auto lane change. It makes me nervous.
I love auto lane change. But I agree with you, Alyssa. The charging network aside, once that there's not a major charging difference between a Tesla or a CCS vehicle, why would you buy a Model X over this?
Yeah, I mean, they're literally the same price. The only thing about, you get the high spec of this is 130 plus or minus.
Yeah.
And then the Plaid is the 130,
150
right?
for a Plaid.
150 for
But the
one.
dual motor
The
long
dual
range
motor,
is
yeah.
130 at
So
today's
then,
money.
Then they really do like compare to each other, but in the end, like this is luxury. You're getting so much more out of your car, so much more for your money than you are with Tesla, in my opinion.
From at least a comfort, build quality, driving dynamics, and luxurious feeling, yes.
Yeah, but if you're spending that much money, isn't that what you want in the end?
It's what I would want. I think it's
Yeah.
what you want. That's why we have an e-tron.
Right.
That's why I would actually consider buying this. Maybe not with the white interior, even though I love
No.
it, but with the dogs it would get destroyed because it's actually leather and it's not easy to clean like some of the new materials. Overall, I think this car, this SUV, is really for someone who wants usable 3 rows, full soccer mom spec, especially here in Colorado. I think they're going to sell 10 times as many SUVs as they do sedans.
Right.
The one that I'm really excited for is the EQE SUV, which will come after this. And I can't say much about it or anything, but I will say that a little bit smaller version of this type of car built on the same EVA platform will be very nice.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is definitely, you get a lot for your money.
Who would ever thought Mercedes value for money? But when you put it in Tesla perspective,
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, the only big difference is like if you do have kids and all that stuff, like your interior, I would be a little bit more worried about this car than I would a Tesla.
Tesla seems to be harder wearing.
Right, but I feel like the Mercedes person, the person who's buying this car, has somebody come to their house to detail their car every single week. And I know people like that because I au paired for a family in Melbourne, and they did that exact thing with their highly spec Mercedes.
Yeah, they had a GLS. Yep.
Yes, so like that's what I see for people who do own this car, and so then it really isn't a problem. It's somebody else's problem to make sure they keep up with it, and you just do what you want.
Or you just spec a black interior.
Or you just spec a black interior, but you know, in the end,
light seats are nice.
A lot of people do like the light seats, and how do you keep up with that? Well, you gotta pay people.
I would go for this spec, blue dash, white seats.
It would get
Dream seat.
destroyed.
I know, but it looks so
off.
nice.
It would I would never be able to replace the e-tron with this,
Right?
Because it would just get destroyed.
Even though we have a cream interior with the e-tron, but this is way, I would say, more sensitive to dirt and dust. So there you go. Basically, the summary is this SUV drives like the EQS sedan on stilts on a lift kit. It is unbelievably comfortable. I would say even more quiet than the sedan. In all-wheel drive form, you very rarely, if ever, hear that front motor like you do in the sedan version, so it's quieter from a drivetrain NVH perspective. You probably have a bit more wind noise just because it's higher up, but you can barely notice any of it. It's so well put together, this thing. That,
and I think this is just the ultimate mom car.
Yeah, ultimate mom car.
It really is. It would just be just a great car in the sense of all that. Just might need to change the color of the interior for longevity.
Yeah, and it would just be a joy to own and live with. And we've seen EQS with miles now, so that it's a known drivetrain, it's a known battery pack. They're holding up pretty well. They get big over-the-air software updates to almost every module, which is really nice. So overall, I would highly recommend this vehicle if you're looking for an electric SUV.
Easy, practical, and luxurious.
Yeah, and it drives wonderfully. It really does. And the driver assistance has been doing everything here on the highway for us. It's truly one of the best driver assistants on the market.
I agree.
It's so good. No ping-ponging, very competent, wonderful head-up display with all of the information right out in front of me. The tech in here is just great. Really just great.
Tech,
yep.
Yes.
So there you go, EQS SUV, huge recommend from us. I would go for the 450 4MATIC. I think that's the sweet spot. I know it's not at launch. At launch, you'll probably want to go for the 580 if you want one right away, but I think you'll be fine with the power levels of the 450 4MATIC, and yeah, enjoy it. Good luck buying it though. That's the problem. You got to buy it from a dealer, and at least here locally in Denver, they're 100 over sticker for the sedan.
Not cool, guys.
Yeah, it's 80 over for a base sedan and 100 over for the AMG sedan, which is just a bit much.
Highway robbery.
And so that is the hard thing. Like with the Tesla, which we just did, you just go on your phone, order it, you pay the price that it says on the website, and then it shows up, and you don't even have to talk to anyone. At a dealer, you're like, can I buy this car for what the manufacturer suggests I should buy it for, which is the MSRP? And Some dealers are very reputable and great and will do it, and I wish to believe that's the vast majority, but there are some dealers that are in the minority that do ruin it for everyone.
Yep.
And unfortunately, at least here in Colorado, locally to us, that seems to be almost every Mercedes dealer.
Yep.
Okay, well, there you go. If you can find one, go for it. You won't be disappointed. It's so comfortable. It's like driving a nice living room couch down the road that can accelerate extremely fast in the 580 version. Thanks for watching another Out of Spec Reviews video. I'm sure this was the most as expected video ever, because it's like, yeah, we've already done everything with the sedan. It's just that couple inches higher.
Yep.